Okay, hello everyone. My name is Michael Downey, Library and Information Services Coordinator at the AWRI, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, the first of two that we have for this week. It's also my pleasure to welcome today's presenter, Dr. Simon Nordesgaard. A senior engineer at the AWRI, Simon has worked in the wine sector for around 10 years and is with us today to discuss recent advances in destemming and sorting technology. But before I go over to Simon to tell us more, a couple of quick notes on what to expect for those that are new to webinars. The format is a short PowerPoint style presentation followed by a Q&A. The session is being recorded and will be available to view via the AWRI website. It's also important to remember that webinars are interactive and that there are a number of ways to get involved. To ask a question, please type into the question section of your control panel in the bottom right corner of your screen. And for those with access to a microphone, there's also the option of speaking directly with Simon by clicking the raise hand button. And this is located in the top left section of your control panel. If you prefer to ask a question via email, please do so at infoservices@awri.com.au. Feel free to send through your questions at any time, and once we get to the Q&A, I'll send through as many questions to Simon as possible. And just finally, if you'd like to get involved through Twitter, please use the Twitter handle @_AWRI. Okay, that's enough from me for now. I'm now going to hand over to Simon to get us started.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks everybody for listening in. So today I'm going to discuss some of the developments in destemming and sorting technology, particularly over the last 10 to 15 years or so. My presentation is really an updated version of one I gave at as part of an the Adelaide ASVO seminar last year in November. I wanted to just start off by setting down some definitions that I'm going to use regarding what's a destemmer and what's a sorter, because there is some overlap. I'm going to define a destemmer as a device that detaches grapes from stems and removes most of the detached stems from the grapes. I define a sorter as a device that is used after a destemmer and that removes further vegetal matter, for example, stem fragments, petioles, leaves, other contaminants or undesirable grapes, for example, diseased or unripe grapes. And then a destemmer sorter is just a destemmer sold with a sorter attached to it, and this configuration is becoming increasingly common. So in the presentation, I'm really going to first talk about winery destemmers and the destemmer sorters that followed. Then I'm going to talk about standalone winery sorters. And finally, I'll talk about harvester-mounted destemmers and sorters, something that's, I guess, has also has taken off a bit over the last 10 to 15 years. So, I guess starting off with the long-existing technology, the rotary destemmer. I mean, these have been used for most of the 20th century, and it's probably still the most common. It is the most common destemming technology used in wineries today. A rotary destemmer has a rotating shaft with paddles in a cage. It attaches the stems from the grapes. The grapes fall through holes in the cage, and the paddles convey the stems out the end of the cage. These rotary destemmers have been used in a variety of configurations over the years, both before and after crushing, or even as crushers themselves by the use of high paddle speeds and different paddle designs. But for a long time now, the industry standard for rotary destemmers has been a rotary destemming prior to roller crushing, and all major winery equipment manufacturers essentially make these devices quite similarly to each other. I guess rotary destemmers are fairly robust and scalable machines, and off-the-shelf models can be purchased that can process 100 tons per hour, even more. Generally, they're pretty effective at removing grapes from stems. The downsides are that they can break some grapes and stems, depending on how they're operated, and petioles and stem fragments can fall through the holes in the cage. There have been incremental improvements in rotary destemmers with time. but it wasn't until relatively recently, around 2000 or so, that destemmers working using fundamentally different principles started to become more available. So probably the first development that I sort of see looking at the literature is around 1999. SOCMA introduced their new linear destemmer. In this device, bunches and stems move on a grid conveyor, and 4 sets of finger wheels rotating in the same direction immediately above the conveyor detach the grapes from the stems through the grid. So obviously that in my I've got the destemmer opened here for the illustration, but obviously that top section is closed. So there's some data on the SOCMA website suggesting that there's lower juicing and less vegetal matter than with a rotary destemmer. This destemmer, while still being available from SOCMA, is also made and sold by Scharfenberger under license. Then in 2006, Milani introduced another different style of destemmer. In this device, bunches are loaded on top of a knobbed conveyor. This conveyor then drops the bunches onto a grill that sways from side to side. The knobs on the underside of the conveyor move the bunches along the grill, and the swaying action of the grill detaches the grapes, which then fall through the grill. The picture on the left is really the feed end of the destemmer, and the picture on the right is the exit end. So with rotary destemmers, I've got some information here on the left of the slide regarding their performance with different beta shaft speeds. It's been shown that with higher beta shaft speeds, as you might expect, more berries are burst, and there's more residual vegetal matter, stem fragments, etc., ending up in the product. So I guess in around 2006, Armbruster introduced a rotary destemmer where the beta shaft actually vibrates, and by adding this vibrating motion to aid berry detachment, they were able to operate the beta shaft at a lower speed than needed for standard rotary destemmers. So that was a modification to existing rotary destemmers to try and make them more gentle. I guess extending on this use of vibration for destemming, in around 2008, Pellenc introduced the first destemmer that I know about that relies purely on vibration for destemming. This Pellenc's device also appears to be the first destemmer sorter, so a destemmer sold packaged with always sold packaged with an attached sorter. In Pellenc's device, bunches are conveyed by a sectioned grid conveyor and an overhead shark fin conveyor. Grapes are detached by 1 or 2 pairs of vibrating destemming rod sets, similar to the mode of action of a machine harvester, really. This process is illustrated on the bottom left of the slide there. The grapes fall through the grid and then onto the integrated 2-stage roller sorting table. The first section of rollers is tightly spaced, allowing only juice and small materials to pass through. The gaps in the second section of roller are larger and the grapes fall through, while the vegetal matter is larger than the gaps is conveyed off the edge of the sorting table. The first section of rollers also have a special shape to encourage the petioles to orient perpendicular to the roller axis, so that they tend to pass across the second section of rollers without falling through with the grapes. In around 2010, SOCMA introduced their own variation on the vibrating destemmer sorter. Like the Palenque system, it uses vibrating rods, but there's only one stage of this vibrating rod system, and the rods point downwards. Material is fed from the top, and rotating star wheels between the rods ensure an even flow rate of material through the destemming chamber. I guess the picture at the top left here is looking in the top of the destemming chamber, and you can see the white yellow beading rods, and you can see the blue star wheels sort of sticking out in between them that help with the conveying the material through the destemming chamber. So underneath the destemming chamber, the detached grapes fall out with the stems on top of them. There's then a vibrating screen section where juice, small materials pass through, and then this is followed by a roller sorting section with larger gaps where the grapes fall through, just like the second stage of the Palenque sorting system. I guess the next thing was that Book of Aslan introduced a different style of vibrating destemmer sorter in around 2011. And this device, bunches enter an angled cylindrical slotted cage that swings from side to side. Grapes are detached from stems as the bunches travel down through the cage. Stems and grapes all pass onto a single section roller sorting table through which the grapes, juice and smalls fall through, and the stems and other petioles and things are conveyed off the end of the sorting table. With this destemmer, they talk about the raisin berries tending to stay on the stems because of its mode of action, and therefore not ending up in the grapes juice and wine, which could be desirable. So there aren't a lot of great studies on the performance of the different new destemmer sorters relative to each other or to rotary destemmers, but I did find a study by Vinceno and colleagues who performed trials with all three of the new vibrating destemmer sorters over the course of a few vintages. This table, translated from their paper, summarizes the performance of the different vibrating destemmer sorters. Their general conclusion seems to have been that the new vibrating destemmer sorter showed broadly similar and pretty decent performance. There seems to be a little bit more juicing with the Book of Aslan device, but this device also gave slightly lower laceration of stems and residual vegetal matter, and the authors mentioned it was also easy to clean. In their paper, the authors also note that grape variety, maturity, and specific equipment settings have major influences on the results. If you are looking at buying one of these three devices, it is probably worth looking at the original French article on the internet at the link at the bottom of the slide for further details, particularly if your French is better than mine. So with regards to the performance of these vibrating destemmer sorters relative to traditional rotary destemmers, I would expect that there would often be less berry breakage and juicing with all these devices compared with the rotary destemmers, which could make sorting easier. If in addition to the integrated rollers you want to use another sorting system as well, for example an optical or a density bath sorting system. One clear advantage of these destemmer sorters over plain rotary destemmers is that they have a sorter, so the residual vegetal matter is going to be lower. I'll talk about this more a bit later, but when I go over the standalone winery sorters, but basically this might make a quality difference for some red wines, I think. The selling of the sorter bundled with the destemmer by manufacturers is an interesting trend. The reason for the bundling is probably partly functional and it's also clever marketing. I guess it's functional in that some of the devices might struggle to separate the bulk detached stems if they didn't have the integrated sorter. It's also functional in that sorting is occurring immediately after destemming, so the grapes are in the best possible condition for sorting. And it's also functional in that the sorter can be included in the same device footprint, so it's not taking up too much space. But it's also pretty clever marketing, because I guess it's some way of upselling people that might not have bought an automated sorter previously to buy one, probably. These new destemmer sorters are more expensive. From a few indicative prices I attained, they seem to be about 2 to 3 times more expensive than a rotary destemmer with the same throughput. They're also still only available in fairly low throughput models. Last year, when I looked at it from discussions with different suppliers, I estimated there were probably around 1,000 of these new destemmer sorters in the world. It'd probably by now be a few hundred more than that. One thing I'm not sure about is that I guess what the maintenance requirements are, potential for blockages and ease of cleaning are for these new devices relative to standard rotary destemmers. There are more small moving parts than a rotary destemmer, so I guess this would be something else to consider if you were gonna buy one, and make sure you're across all these details. So I'm going to move now to talk a little bit about standalone winery sorters. I apologise, a little bit of overlap with what I've just gone through with the sorters integrated with the destemmers. I'm going backwards a little bit, but yeah, that's just how I sort of organised the presentation in the end. I guess starting with manual sorting, this has been obviously performed in some form in some regions for as long as wines have been produced. This is a slow and labour-intensive process and requires a lot of concentration. When it is done, manual sorting is typically facilitated by conveying tables that spread grapes and present them to the people sorting. Belt conveyor tables and/or vibrating conveyor tables are used. The vibrating tables often have small slots for juice drainage, smalls removal. And I guess with manual sorting, you can do it before and/or after destemming. With some of the automated sorting systems, at the moment it's always performed after destemming. So I guess the next extension of having a manual sorting table with some small slots that juice and smalls can fall through is to have a second stage screen with holes or prongs that grapes pass through. The devices on the left just use a vibrating screen for this second stage that the grapes fall through, and then the petioles and stuff get conveyed off the end, and the device on the right has a belt with holes that the grapes fall through. And again, the petioles and stuff are getting conveyed off the end of that belt. In these devices, in between the first and second stage screens, or there's usually some form of leveling bar or flat to ensure that only a single layer of material enters the second section of the device, therefore preventing excessive grape losses off the end of the device with the petioles, which might happen if you flooded the second stage of the screen. I guess an extension of this two-stage sorting screens was introduced in around 2004 by Vaucher. In addition to the two-stage vibrating screen, they employed an air jet to blow away remaining light materials. This air jet can remove petioles, leaves, larger raisins, and smashed grape skins. The air jet operates on materials as they fall off an edge. In the picture here, you can see the two-stage vibrating screen, and at the end of this, there's that blower with the air jet that blows away some of the light materials. For this style of air jet to be effective, the material needs to be well spaced, otherwise good components may obstruct the air jet from blowing away bad components. The material flow rate therefore has to be reasonably slow. In 2013, Book of Aslan introduced an alternative system, also relying on the air-jet concept, but instead of relying on gravity feeding of the material to the air-jet zone, it uses a high-speed conveyor belt to space the material to be sorted. Under the influence of the air-jet, the lighter wastes follow a different trajectory off the end of the belt and are removed. This mode of operation allows for higher throughput per device width than the Vaucher-Piguet style gravity-fed system, but I guess essentially it's operating on a similar principle with regards to moving some of the wastes. I guess as we saw earlier when I was talking about the vibrating destemmer sorters, roller sorters are commonly used, but they can also be purchased separately and been put into existing winery setups. Sometimes they just have, there's lots of different models around, but sometimes they just have a single stage of rollers that all the grapes, juice and smalls all fall between, and sometimes they have 2 stages of rollers, with the first being closely spaced and allowing for separate juice and smalls removal. I guess a bit like the 2 stages in the Palenque destemmer sorter, and as shown bottom right here for an Innovita roller sorter. Something else I've noticed is that with higher capacity roller sorters, they seem to come with different ways of spreading out the material across the width of the rollers at the feed to the roller sorting table. Some, like at the top left, have vibrating spreading feed chutes, while others, like at the bottom left, have sweeping arms that move from side to side to spread out the material. These sort of arrangements probably allow for higher throughputs than otherwise might be possible, and wider roller sorting tables. So I guess in the sorting systems I've discussed so far, sorting has really been related to size, shape and mass of the components, and while some of these systems had a limited ability to remove some undesirable grapes like shot berries and raisins, their focus is probably more about removing vegetal matter. In around 2005, Amos Industry introduced a different style of system, which, in addition to using several mechanical separation steps, also incorporates a density bath to separate ripe from unripe grapes. The ripe grapes sink, while the unripe grapes float in a sugar or juice solution of set density. I've circled the density bath in the schematic on the left, and I've got a picture of it on the right, and the overflow you can see is the unripe. It has a few unripe grapes in it that are coming over the top with the overflowing sugar or juice solution. This density bath can also be used to cool grapes if the solution is connected to a refrigeration system. That same company, Amos, have also more recently introduced a device designed to grade grapes into different diameter categories, which they suggest can be used after that previous true bay sorting system. Grapes larger than the set roller gap travel across the top of the roller drum, and grapes smaller than the gap fall into the roller drum at the top and fall out at the bottom. There's these special spring-loaded rollers on this drum that are held in place by a strap at the top of the drum rotation, but which releases the rollers at the bottom of the drum rotation. So material that's gone in at the top can fall out at the bottom, and this allows you to come up with 2 different grape diameter fractions. So the last sort of main sorting technology I want to discuss is optical sorters. Optical sorters have been used in other industries for many years. The first published mention that I've seen of them being used for sorting grapes is for some trials actually in Australia in 2004. But the first major commercial implementations seem to have occurred in the European wine industry in around 2008. Optical sorters, there's generally a pre-draining screen to get rid of any of the juice, after which the material is then spread out and imaged. With some of the lower throughput machines, this might be done while they're falling by gravity, while often edged by gravity, or on some of the higher throughput machines, and even some of the low throughput machines as well. There's they're separated using a fast belt, and they're imaged on the belt. The defects are then ejected by air nozzles. So basically, across the width of the device, there's maybe 100 different little nozzles, which can be controlled independently to reject the bits that have been identified as defects. So optical sorters can sort by size and shape, and also by color, and sometimes also by other spectral regions. For example, some of them use red light that fluoresces chlorophyll in some of the vegetal matter that is then detected in the NIR. There are differences between the different equipment offered by different manufacturers, but to be honest, I don't have enough first-hand experience with the different devices to know which is better or worse if they all perform reasonably equivalently. I mean, there's obviously a lot of proprietary information in the algorithms and things that they use. One issue that I've heard from several independent sources is that there can be difficulties in being able to sort out red grapes with mold on them. Some suppliers say their equipment can do it, but if being able to sort out red grapes and mold on them is a major reason if you're buying an optical sorter, I'd probably want to run some trials to determine its effectiveness. There are quite a few companies now making these optical sorters for the wine industry. Initially, it seems like they were mainly Bukovaslin, Palenque, and then Protec, which was being distributed by Di Franceschi. But in the last few years, other optical sorting companies like Key and Waco have released devices, and they've also teamed up with traditional wine industry equipment suppliers. For example, Key with Ina Veneta and Waco with Scharfenberger. Just looking at yesterday on the internet, I saw that Armbruster were developing an optical sorter as part of a research project, and Cyprum also have a coming soon note on optical sorting on their website as well. So it seems like that might be increasing competition in this space. This table provides sort of a summary of available sorting systems, including estimates of throughput, costs, and adoption in Australia and worldwide, based on some discussions I had with various major suppliers. There are a few points that sort of take away from this information that were of interest to me. Because firstly, the density bath and optical sorting systems are considerably more expensive, 5 to 10 times more than some of the more basic mechanical sorting systems, but you get paid for an extent. They offer a great ability to sort different grapes instead of just removing vegetal matter. Secondly, there are only, was something that was interesting to me, was that there are only around 250 optical sorters being used in the whole world, which was a bit surprising since they're always so prominent at trade shows. But I guess it also corresponds with their higher price tag. Thirdly, something that stands out is that the biggest pathway to sort uptake is apparently via those integrating with vibrating, is via those integrated with vibrating destemmers. Perhaps it sort of fits in the sweet spot of what most people are prepared to spend on a sorting solution. Finally, something that is obvious is that there isn't much sorting equipment being used in Australia. This could be a function of there not having been a lot of manual sorting being performed previously relative to other regions of the world, partly because we probably don't have the regular disease issues that some others do. But this makes capital investment in automated equipment more difficult to justify because there aren't the labour savings from changing to manual to automated sorting equipment. So there's all this winery sorting equipment available you can buy and use. Is it worth the effort? I guess to be honest, this is a pretty difficult question to answer, and it depends on a lot of factors. What condition of the grapes you're in? What is the wine style? How much are you selling the wine for? And can you therefore justify spending for something that may be on the margins of influencing quality? If we just look at the topic of the removal of vegetal matter, probably depends a lot on whether you're making white or red wine. With white wine, residual vegetal matter is unlikely to have make much of a difference because there's only usually a fairly short contact period between juice and vegetal matter before pressing. With red wine, the residual vegetal matter is more likely to impact on quality as it will be in contact with the juice and the wine during fermentation. Vincenot and Verns report that 1% residual vegetal matter can negatively impact quality for some red wines, and our own colleagues trialed many pieces of sorting equipment, and just as a summary, they sort of before sorting vegetal matter was typically between 0.4 and 1.7%, and after it was 0.1 and 0.4%. So basically before and after sorting, maybe it suggests that sorting could have an influence in some circumstances. So as I said something that else has happened in recent years is that destemming systems have moved away from always being located at the winery to sometimes being performed on the harvester itself. If we look at machine harvesters, I guess they've always been destemmers to an extent, since some of the stems are left on the vine as grapes are shaken off. I've got some rough data here. Just saying that, with the vegetal matter in hand-picked grapes, because of all the stems, might be 7%, but in machine harvested grapes it might only be 1 to 2%. I guess machine harvesters have also always provided some cleaning or sorting action via fans to blow away leaves. I guess with regards to more explicit destemming, from what I can see, rotary destemmers have been trialled on harvesters since at least the late 1980s, but it seems like it was only in the 2000s with the advent of the new styles of some of the new styles of destemmers that I've mentioned, that on-harvested destemmers gained major commercial uptake in some regions of the world. Broad, New Holland has offered a version of the Schaffenberger Euro Select style destemmer on its machine harvesters since around 2002. These are mounted above the onboard grape bins. Studies at the time, shortly after they were released, showed that the removal of vegetal matter using this system was similar or better than standard machine harvesting, followed by use of a rotary destemmer at a winery. There was slightly more juicing when using the onboard destemmer than not. More recently, Broad New Holland launched its Optical sorting system to complement the destemmer. This employs an air jet to blow away lighter waste materials. In addition to removing vegetal matter, Broad New Holland claimed that it can remove some botrytis-affected grapes. This device is very much aimed at low-yield, high-quality vineyards, and they're still selling the destemmer without the sorting system for use in other vineyards. In around 2008, Palenque introduced their new on-harvester destemming and sorting system. This device seems to have been the first significant commercially available sorting system on a harvester. This design is really the same as the winery destemmer sorter that I spoke about earlier from Palenque, except that it's mounted directly above the onboard grape bins on each side of the harvester, and any juice, smalls passing through the first stage of rollers passes directly into the bins together with the grapes passing through the second stage of rollers. Shortly after Palenque, Gregoire, they released their onboard destemming and sorting system. They call it their CleanTech destemmer, and from what I can make out, it's really a cross between the destemmer used on the broad harvesters and a traditional rotary destemmer. So there's a little image on the bottom left here that shows the whole destemming and sorting system, but basically consists of a grid conveyor loop with a single finger wheel that spins inside it at one end. The image in the middle here is the finger wheel. The stem material passes through the grid, then passes over a roller sorting table. Again, this destemming and sorting system is mounted over the onboard bins on each side of the harvester. With those, the broad New Holland, Palenque and Gregoire systems, one thing is that they are all currently only available on harvester models that use onboard bins. They're not compatible with discharge conveyors that feed a chaser tractor bin, which is probably the most common method used for grape harvesting in Australia. AWRI, a smaller German harvester producer, offer a system that can work with a discharge conveyor. They employ really a traditional winery style rotary destemmer with a roller sorting table underneath it. The compatibility with a discharge conveyor it was probably perhaps a little easier for them to achieve than the other manufacturers, because their harvester only conveys the picked grapes at one side of the machine rather than both sides, so they probably have a bit more room to play with. Just recently, Oxbow, an American harvester manufacturer, have released a destemming sorting system for their harvester. The destemmer appears very similar to that on the Gregoire harvesters, except instead of being located over the bins on both sides, it is mounted centrally and at the rear of the harvester. Their sorting system, which is I've shown on the bottom right here, is a grid belt that grapes fall through, but which some of the petioles and stuff stay on the top of the belt and are conveyed off the belt. This belt is moving in a sort of a ratcheting motion, faster, slower to shake the grapes through. Like the AWRI device, this machine is compatible with a discharge conveyor across to a chaser tractor with a bin, but unlike the AWRI device, grapes are conveyed up both sides of the harvester. So with regards to quality, are you better off destemming and sorting in the winery or on the harvester? Again, it's probably dependent on whether you're making red or white wine. For red wine production, key factor is probably going to be the residual vegetal matter during fermentation. So it may be advantageous to sort, but probably doesn't generally matter if this is done on the harvester or in the winery. But at the same time, you probably wouldn't destem on the harvest if you're planning to sort in the winery, because it might cause some berry breakage and juicing during transport that makes the sorting at the winery more difficult. But I'm not sure how many people would be machine harvesting and sorting in the winery anyway. For white wine production, the most important factor is likely to be the level of berry breakage with the on-harvested destemmer. If the system is too rough, there may be more berry breakage and higher levels of skin-derived phenolics in the free-run juice fraction at the winery's press. But I guess one thing to note with most of the systems described, all the systems described really allow for the destemming and sorting system to be bypassed. And this seems to have got increasingly easier with some of the newer models, because I guess that's what people have asked for. So perhaps you can run your red grapes through the destemming and sorting system and not your white grapes if you desire. Another thing to think about is that the inclusion of a destemmer and a sorter and a machine harvester might limit harvesting speeds. The destemming and the sorting system will only be able to process a certain rate of material before performance will decline. If the rate is too high, there may be incomplete destemming and grape losses, or grape and stem breakage in the destemmer, or grape losses from the sorter. And I mean, I don't have any data on the different manufacturers, but I mean, the capacity of the systems is going to vary between brands and models. I guess but definitely in some of the higher yielding vineyard regions, you would expect that slower than normal harvesting speeds would be needed. So this is really sort of one of my final slides, but I just wanted to discuss sort of the adoption of on-harvester destemming and sorting systems in Australia. It's apparently still very low here. It's a technology that apparently has been much more widely adopted in France, New Zealand, and some other countries. There are probably a few reasons for the low adoption rates in Australia, but essentially it probably relates most to, I guess, the unprofitability of grape growing in Australia in many regions at the moment, and probably also the fact that grape and wine production are performed often by separate entities. An on-harvester system means that vegetal matter and some grapes would get left in the vineyard that growers currently get paid for by the weight at the winery. And furthermore, while a destemming and sorting system may only add, from my discussions with suppliers, only about 2 to 10% to the approximately $400,000 capital cost of a harvester, other operating costs are increased. As I already discussed, slower harvesting speeds might be needed in some instances, depending on the machine and the vineyard yield, and also, well, as I mentioned before, I guess the main 3 harvester brands, their systems only work with onboard bins at the moment, and not compatible with discharge conveyors to chaser bins, to bins on chaser tractors. Another thing is that the destemming and sorting systems have more mechanical parts that in turn probably require more maintenance. Some people that I've spoken to that have recently purchased or leased harvesters with onboard systems, I know that justified the cost based on them being a suitable replacement for hand picking. And I've also heard recently something about one company paying growers a premium for grapes harvested by machines with the onboard destemming and sorting systems. I don't know how widespread this is. I think in the longer term, despite some of the costs of using the on-harvester destemming and sorting systems that I've discussed, systems evolve and market conditions change, it's probably likely that a much larger proportion of Australian harvesters will end up having an onboard destemming and sorting system. So I'd like to thank a few groups of people that helped with information in this presentation. Firstly, the various equipment suppliers who provided information on their equipment and their perspective. Secondly, wine industry personnel who offered their perspective. Next, the people who've posted videos of the operation of the various bits of equipment online. I guess when I first gave this presentation at the ASVO seminar last year, I had a bunch of 30-second clips explaining how the different bits of equipment work. I had to cut these out of this presentation because they weren't going to play very well via the webinar platform. But I've uploaded all the videos to my Google Drive, and this link goes to them, and Michael's going to forward this link with the follow-up email he sends after the webinar, so you can go and have a look at some of all the different bits of equipment, and some of the videos probably explain better than how they show how they work. I'd also like to acknowledge and recommend the Metevi website. If you haven't heard of this before, this is where I got some of the information on the performance of the destemming and sorting equipment. This website's all in French, but it does have a lot of reports that the French Institute of Vine and Wine have written on trials involving different bits of equipment over the years. And generally I find you can get the gist of them using Google Translate. Yeah, I apologise to them if I've misinterpreted any of the nuances. And finally, just a disclaimer, I guess we haven't received any funding to work on the topic of destemming and sorting, so a lot of the information that I'm presenting is secondhand and assembled from a variety of different sources. I have tried, not successfully so far, to get funding to evaluate the different performance of different sorting technologies, because I would like to be able to provide first-hand data for the Australian wine sector, but I guess this hasn't worked out so far. So I guess that's the end of my presentation. Michael, yeah, if people have got any questions.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Simon. As Simon's just indicated, we will go through from here into a Q&A. Simon's going to stick around for a while. So if you've got any questions, please start sending them through now. Just a reminder, if you do want to ask a question, you can type it into the control panel, into your control panel, and click to send it through. If you've got a microphone and you want to chat directly with Simon, please click the raise hand button. And you can also send in your questions via email. Send them through to infoservices@awri.com.au.
The question is, there seems to be a total lack of data on the effect of petioles on quality. So I guess personally, we haven't done any work on this this topic. I haven't come across any great data from looking at sites like that Metevi. I think the only sort of rule of thumb that I've seen with regards to the effective quality was that 1% value that might have an effect on red wine quality. And I think with some of these sorts of studies, I think you could probably do lots of different studies, and we'll get different results each time of where the important level is. But yeah, I'd agree. There's probably benefit in further studies on things like this. Yeah, because I mean, obviously it is an investment in buying this sort of equipment, and it'd be nice to know if it is actually having an effect on quality.
Okay, thanks for your question there, Brian. That's all we've got with regard to questions for today. No, sorry, just had another question come through.
So the question is, do you have a feeling for how many harvester-mounted units are in use? I guess it was a while back that I was speaking with the different harvester manufacturers, but I'd say it's a very small fraction. I might look into that, Tony, and I'll get back to you with, I guess, the most precise answer that I can give. But I sort of got the impression it might be 5%, 10%, something like that, or even less. It's a very small number. When in discussions about other countries, like in France and New Zealand, I've got the impression that there might be like 50% of harvesters have a destemmer, at least a destemmer on them. So where Australia is definitely quite different. But I'll follow up with you and give you the best information that I can on that.
Okay, great. Thanks for your question there, Tony. As I was saying, we will start to wrap up now because it looks like that's it with regard to the questions. So I'd firstly like to thank Simon for coming in and presenting today. I also like to thank everyone who's attended and took part in today's session. For attendees, you'll receive a follow-up email. This email will contain a link to this recording, and it will also contain a link to a survey. The next AWRI webinar is this coming Thursday, and it will be presented by Dr. Catherine Eales from the University of Adelaide. And the topic for the session is winery wastewater treatment, cleaning water with happy microbes. Now, if you haven't already registered for this webinar and would like to do so, please visit the AWRI website. Okay, that's all we have for today. Thank you again for attending, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next AWRI webinar.